Hi everybody, and welcome to another part of the JavaScript tutorials. In this part we're going to talk about the promises. Notice that promises is an alternative to the callbacks, and we do not generally use the callbacks. Instead we use promises. So here we're going to see how using promises is going to happen and how it makes things much less complicated. So here I've brought a very simple example. So we usually define the promise, or we use the promises instead of the functions. So here we've defined the promise, and so we use the new promise, and then the function is inside of it. It can get two attributes, myResolve and myReject, which I'm going to explain what they are. But in general, myResolve means that when your function works and it is successful, so that it returns something successfully, and myReject is when it kind of throws an error. But this is different than throwing an error. We're going to explain that through the examples that we're going to work on. There are 4 examples that we're going to work. So the first of all, notice that we most usually use promises when a function takes some time to happen. So to simulate that time that happens for a function to finish, we use the set timeout to simulate that delay. So here we've defined the 3 seconds delay in order to simulate that. So here we've got the set timeout and then the function, and then myResolve is showing to the console or to the one of the elements of the DOM, welcome to promises tutorials. So it will appear after 3 seconds when we have the myResolve scenario. But if we have myReject scenario, something else will happen. But here, because we want to make things simpler, we're going to only work on the myResolve. So right after writing this function, we will call the myPromise, and in order to do that we use myPromise.then, and .then is when we want to use that promise. So instead of it, we use the name of the function, and the input that it gets here is a value, but actually we don't have that kind of value. It's just a message right over here. So now what we're going to do is to add this to the elements of our HTML tags. So as you can see, the inner HTML of the p tag with the ID demo is written updating, and after 3 seconds you will be able to see that the value will replace this updating message, which will be the welcome to promises tutorials. So let's save this and run this with the live server. Okay, there we go. So as you can see, it's updating, and after 3 seconds we've got the welcome to promises tutorials. So that's a very simple example, and it works after this function gets finished. So generally in this tutorial, in order to simulate the amount of time it takes for a function to finish, we use the set timeout, and that's generally why we use promises. We use promises in order to wait for a function to finish, and then we will do something else afterwards. So here .then is going to do that for us. So first of all, this function will happen, and then we will add this to the element, or we will do anything we want based on the kind of project we're working on. So the next example is this promise2.html that I've written. It has the very same HTML codes. However, you might want to delete this updating in the p tag. It's totally up to you. You can set some alerts or log it to the console. It's totally up to you. So here we've got the function DOM function, and here it will get a number, and instead of this myID, instead of the p tag, it will replace this updating message with the number that we will give this p tag right over here. So let's see what kind of promise here we have. So we'll again define a promise, and we define it this way: new promise, and then the name of a function, and then again we have myResolve and myReject. However, in some of the examples you will see that we do not use the myResolve and myReject. We generally write the function and wait for it to finish. So here we've done something very simple. We have declared a equal to 1, so assigned 1 to a, and here we've said that if a is equal to 1, my resolve is okay, so the okay message can be shown, or if that is not true, it will be an error, so it will throw an error. So after that, my promise that then after my function has got finished, this my promise will be activated, and then we will have our function with the value. So if it has the value of okay, then it will show the value, and if it has a function, the function throws an error, then it will show an error. So this is what it's going to get. So right over here it's going to be the value, because a is equal to 1, and if we check a is equal to 1, it will be 1, so it will be my resolve equals to okay, and then it will show the number right over here. So let's run this on the live server and let's check what happens. As you can see, okay shows up, and by the way, this is just a message, not a number. You can change this to message. So I'm gonna do this very quick, change all occurrences, and then the message instead of the number. This is much more beautiful. Here we're only going to show if something works or not, and if it works, if there is this my resolve, then it will show okay. If it is not my resolve, then it will show an error. This is the actual message that will be shown here in this element. So let me assign 2 to variable a, and let's save this. Now let's head over to the browser, and as you can see, error appears. Now let me make this a bit smaller so that you can better see this, and now let's change it back to 1 and save this. As you can see, okay appears, and by the way, it takes no time because here we have no set timeout. But notice that if inside of your promise you have a kind of function that, for example, takes time for uploading or downloading or loading a photo or any other kind of file, then it will take some time, and my promise will wait for that, and after that it will activate this kind of operation right over here inside of the parentheses. Now in the following, let's get into the promise tree.html, and let us take a look at a different example. So here, as you can see, we have defined a success, which is a kind of a status of the operation instead of our function. This is just a simulation of whether the process has been successful or unsuccessful. Imagine that we're uploading a file, and in the middle of the uploading, internet is cut off, and you have no connection to the internet, so the process fails, and as a result we will have a rejection instead of resolve. So here let's define a function. So it's a function called getNumber, and it will return a promise. Again, it has a resolve and a reject, and it has a set timeout which is equal to 1 second. So if the operation is successful, here we've defined success to be false. It can be true. So if it's successful, we will get into the resolve, and a will be equal to 10. Otherwise, we get into the else, and it will return an error message, which is the result of reject, which says failed to get the number. So here we've defined two functions for the resolve and the reject. So first of all, we get the promise. So the promise equals to get number, and then we write promise.then unfulfilled and unrejected. So for the unfulfilled is for the resolve right over here. So we've got a promise with two attributes, resolve and reject. And so for the resolve, we have unfulfilled, which is this function. So it will show an alert with the number a, and it will console log a as well. But on the unrejected function, we will have the error shown to the user with the alert. So now let's save the file and run it with the live server. And as you can see, failed to get the number, and the reason is success here is false. Notice that here success is the representation of the success of the process, so you do not necessarily have to define this. This is just a simulation of the success of the process. So let me set this to true, and let's take a look at the browser, and as you can see, 10 appears instead of the error. So let me make the console, the editor smaller, and again make this to false, save this, and after a second you'll see that failed to get number appears. So that's it for the promise tree, and now let's get to the promise4.html, which is the same code, but here we've got a different kind of handling the errors of the promise. Here, as you can see, instead of the promise tree, we had unrejected and unfulfilled function in order to handle the two kinds of situation that we face. But here, instead of that, we have .then, just the same as before, and .catch for error handling, and also we've got .finally for either it has been successful or unsuccessful. It will anyway show this or run this operation on the either the console or the DOM elements or the alerts, whatever you want to use it. So this is another kind of error handling in promises. So this is exactly the same function, and here the success is set to the true. So once it is successful, you will see that the number appears on the console, and also because it is success, it will show finished with either error or success. Also, if we face error and the success is false, then we will be seeing this error message and also finally message, which is finished with either error or success. There are times that you do not care about the result, whether it's an error or it's success. You want to say that this promise process has finished. So for those kind of circumstances, you use finally. So now let's save this and run this with the live server. And so this updating will always be updating because we haven't added anything to the elements. But here on the console we have the array, which is 10, because this success is true here, and also finished with either error or success. But if we set this to false and save this, on the console you will see that failed to get the number instead of the number 10, and again you will see finished with either error or success. So it will also show the finishing of this whole promise thing. And this is another way to handle the process on a promise. So that's it for this part of the tutorial, and in this video we try to show you how a promise works, why we use it, and how we different methods we can write it. But this is not a real-world example. None of these are real-world examples. In the future tutorials we will give you a bigger example and more real-world examples that you can use the promises. And in the next part we're also going to work on the async and async await. So that's it for this part of the tutorial.